Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 138th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, I'll discuss something that is not easy to talk about, but it is trying to figure out the criteria for determining what is the next kind of relative truth or larger truth that we're meant to uncover. Why that will become the truth for us. It's this idea, like in the last episode, I was talking about operating systems and applications. So the universe as being this kind of nested system of truths or paradigms or worldviews that eventually that are sometimes conflicting, and then eventually they sort of merge into a higher kind of truth, and lower truths become a kind of an applications running inside a higher truth, which is a kind of an operating system. And here, I'll try to discuss what the criteria are for that. And for that, you need to understand that this idea of linear time has to be abandoned. And so let's just go from this idea of the switch from monotheism to science, all right? Let's imagine that here you have a timeline, and let's say that at a certain point here you have a sort of a switch or shift where the consciousness of most humans sort of switches to a scientific or a materialist way of viewing the world, and then reality then sort of shapes reality to look more and more in accordance with that kind of worldview. And let's just also say that you have plenty of timelines, potential timelines, branching out in every kind of direction based on that kind of worldview. And now imagine that the level of consciousness of humans at that point in time would have been such that regardless of the number of parallel timelines, eventually at a certain stage, just because science being what it is, they will have discovered nuclear energy or nuclear or theories and the atomic bomb. And in virtually no parallel timeline was there the potential for humanity to not self-destroy or self-destruct. That is, that humanity would have not had assimilated, for instance, or evolved enough under monotheism for there to be some kind of overarching ethics that would prevent humans to destroy themselves, because they would, think that there wouldn't be no fear of punishment from God, and no overarching kind of morale or ethics. And their level of consciousness would have been such that they would all destroy themselves, and that's the end. Now, I believe that if that were the case, then this shift would have never happened, and would be diverted to another kind of parallel timeline where maybe it would have been like, I don't know, Protestant faith that would have taken over, or Buddhism, or anything else, I don't know, like some kind of other kind of weird worldview that has nothing to do with science, that could federate more people than millions of people, but that would not have ended with humanity destroying itself. And this is because, to me, time is not linear. That is, to give you I've talked about this in previous videos, but the fact that every time you have a thought as a human being, it sort of creates a whole universe where that thought has a life of its own. And it has obviously a certain amount of power, a certain amount of energy, and it can't, create a universe that is as big as this one, but it can create a holographic or very ethereal universe, which is nonlinear, and where the consequences, or as many consequences as possible, of that thought coming into existence or affecting reality are tested. So just like in your dreams, you can have, time is compressed. Maybe people say that basically, some scientists say that basically your dreams happen a split second before you wake up, but you have the subjective impression that they take forever, or that they can last hours and hours. It's the same for your thoughts. They are in a dimension or realm where there is not this kind of linear time concept. And so just like your computer can run billions and billions of simulations in a matter of seconds, like they can run billions of Mario games to learn how to play Mario better. In the same way, the thoughts that you contemplate reverberate into a kind of dimension which is atemporal, or where time doesn't flow in the same way. And they can test all kinds of different potentialities, branches, and if the outcome isn't positive, you as a human will end up feeling it as a feeling, saying, well, that may be not such a good idea. Maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Maybe I shouldn't be contemplating those kind of thoughts. That is also what our emotions are for. It's almost like, imagine like you how should I say this? Okay, so imagine you're standing in a pool of water, and you give sort of an impulse with your body, and that creates a number of waves here on the surface of the water, and then it hits against a wall, and the waves come back, and they affect you in return. But it's almost as if the whole process the adventures that those waves have gone through is like you giving the impulse for the first musical note of a symphony, and then the whole symphony writing itself, and then it coming back to you, and you experience what it felt like listening to that symphony instantaneously. And that is completely unconscious. Only people that are clairvoyant can actually sort of unravel the granularity or the contents of the symphony. But as a regular individual, what you will remember, though, is if that symphony was harmonious, whether it sounded good, or whether it was dissonant and it was painful to listen to. And we've all been to, concerts of amateur orchestras trying to play pieces that were way too difficult for them, and the pain that it took to like sit through that and listen to it. And we've also all been to concerts of amazing orchestras, and how beautiful that was, the experience. And so just imagine that that's how things work. And so when I'm talking about an operating system, what you have to differentiate is the temptation to find a truth using what is most logical, or what has most evidence, or what is more true due to certain objective, quote unquote, criteria that you may believe are valid. Any kind of construct of the mind, including my own, of any kind of operating system that will sit above science and that will federate all of the competing theories that are out there, it will not be chosen based on these criterias. It will be based on this process, which is whatever that truth is, whatever that kind of theory is, if it were adopted by all of humanity today or in the coming years, if within all the potential timelines, humanity is not at the global level, at a level of consciousness where it can integrate or use that operating system or that world vision in a way that will, how should I say, create something harmonious, or that will not lead to a dead end, then that operating system, regardless of how great or attractive it may be, will not be chosen in one way or another. It will be discarded. For it doesn't have to be for objective reasons. It can just be people will not be interested, will not understand it. It can be a million reasons. And we have, because we're still stuck in materialism and we're still affected by certain methodologies from science, we assume that it will be discarded for reasons because, I don't know, there's no evidence for it, or there's no factual, there's no facts that you can gather. But that may not be the case. This process is not, there's no methodology for this process. It's just that if the universe really truly wants to experience itself, then it cannot reach a dead end. Infinity cannot reach a dead end. There's always more to infinity. And so if a certain paradigm or a new worldview leads to an end, then that will inevitably be discarded. And so the logic is you always have paradigms that expand possibilities. Like, for instance, you were stuck in this tribal kind of vision. You were performing human sacrifices, and that was kind of leading to a dead end. And then monotheism is actually an expansion. It feels like an expansion because suddenly there are rules, like things are more stable, and you don't have these arbitrary decisions by the shamans of saying, today we have to sacrifice this, the spirits told me that. You have a written book to rely on. But then you have inquisitions and all that stuff, and again, like it goes into a funnel, and like again, there's this dead end of the apocalypse that you self-manifest via your belief system, and then science is the same thing. It expands, and then it contracts again with today climate change and all kinds of other kind of, the materialist kind of ethos and the materialist world vision, and resources lacking, a lot of stuff. And you have to have a new expansive force, but realize that this process has to go into infinity. And that this new worldview or paradigm is subservient not to any kind of criteria that may be objective that you could list as saying it's better for this and this or that reason. It's just because it perpetuates this logic. And so there aren't actually any objective arguments you could say. What you can do, though, and what I'm trying to do every time, is to tell myself and the universe as a kind of a message, or as a guidance system, to say, I know that this is the way that the whatever future system or something that will transcend science will emerge. This is the process via which it'll happen, and I'm open to I'm open for this to be anything. I don't have any kind of preset ideas or fixed ideas. And if you've listened to this channel and my messages from day one, I have certain number of let's say, cornerstones to my worldview, which is, for instance, whole on philosophy, the fact that the universe structures itself in parts that are just that form a whole, and that whole is just a part in a bigger whole. That the universe, that consciousness seeks to expand to embrace the universe in its entirety, and so when humans are harmonized and form a collective global organism that sort of gives birth, so to speak, to a conscious planet, or a planet becoming self-aware through humans as its parts, that humans are the bridge between the physical dimension or the material dimension and the immaterial dimension, that is ideas, concepts, thoughts, which are beyond space and time. All of these are a kind of a hint. And you have so many hints that we're reaching this point where the new operating system is starting to appear, even though it's really fuzzy. With simulation theory, with so many different things. Like if you imagine this reality to just be a play of light, just a play of light, then, and you as a consciousness, a conscious being, have the power to manipulate that light to show something to you, to do something, like, you manipulate your dreams, basically. Sometimes when they're, when you're conscious in your dreams, or when you do lucid dreaming, or even sometimes when you do astral projection. Well, then the rules or the limitations you give yourself in manipulating the light, which is, science, for instance, is a limitation on how you can sort of bend or co-create or do things with light, are tailored to your level of consciousness as an individual to perpetuate the experience, to make sure that you don't completely mess everything up. And so, whether it's Nassim Harameyn's theories and his holofractal universe, Harameyn, or the CTMU or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Realize that if humans are not ready for any of these theories, then it doesn't matter if they're right in the absolute, if they lead to a dead end, if tomorrow all of humans sort of adopt them and the level of consciousness is not such that we can use these in a way that perpetuates the experience. Because that's one of the lessons of this reality that we're in right here, is this unbreakable chain of, a living cell and, all of the different things that spawn from that living cell reaching all the way up to us. And since we're the bridge between the material world and the world of ideas, we are kind of like humans harmonized as a collective, are kind of like a seed for ideas to form clusters to experience themselves. So just imagine that in the future, you'd have pockets of living ideas. And you can have like a pocket of ideas here that is like democracy, justice, love. And there you have a pocket of like war, peace, and something else. And here you have another pocket of ideas, another pocket of ideas. And they'd be like almost like cells or living beings interacting with each other, having experiences. And you understand that at the outset, this form, like the first living cell, has to be so neutral and dead centered, and that's what's the magical part of it, which is, and that's so delicate, is that it needs to be so balanced that it will manifest all that diversity, but yet from that diversity you'll still reach the next level or bridge between two dimensions. That is, if you follow my videos, I say the living cell is the bridge between chemistry and biology. And the humans are the bridge between biology and the world of ideas, thoughts, concepts, whatever. And all of these theories, whether it's science, light, holon, all these terms I use are grounded in the realm of ideas, concepts, and thoughts. They don't exist in the realm of biology. I mean, all of this is, non-existent. And we're giving a form to this. We're pooling all of these ideas and manifesting them and overlaying them on top of this reality. If humans disappear, democracy disappears with them. The animal kingdom is not going to suddenly pick up the idea of democracy. It will just vanish as if, going into its more ethereal realm. But so long as humans are on the planet, they can give a physical form to that idea via their collective actions and beliefs. And so, it's this thing that I've been saying, like the laws of physics are what they are because they allow the laws of chemistry to exist on top of them. The laws of chemistry are what they are because they allow the emergence of the laws of biology on top of them. The laws of biology are what they are because they allow for the emergence of beings like us, humans. And so the first living cell, the way that it functions already at the outset, it's almost as if it has tested the potential, making sure that you inevitably and invariably arrive to the destination point. Otherwise, again, infinity would come to a stop. The experience would come to a stop. And that no can do. There is no end point or limit or, end to infinity. So the laws or the operating system that will govern, that we will adopt as humanity, that will federate all of the other ones that will become applications in that operating system, whether in science is obviously now one of them, because it's not the thing that can harmonize or account for all of the other theories, will be what it will be, because it will allow the perpetuation of that kind of logic, that whatever comes after us, whatever, like, I don't know how to call this, like a being made up of bubbles of self-aware ideas that would harmonize and form something bigger. I don't know. It's just too much for me. But whatever that may be, whatever the next hold on step will be, something that is the bridge between the world of ideas and thought, and something even that transcends that, well, the laws that we're going to adopt are going to be what they will be, because they'll allow for the experience leading all the way up to that transcendence, which we will have to experience as humans, while the privilege of experiencing, and whatever comes after us, our own evolution. But it's almost as if this is already set. This is already like the target goal. So you could think of it as, these Tesla balls, where you have like electricity and you have a differential and potential, and then you have like lightning that springs from it, and they want to touch each other, and then there's like this light of electricity that goes between them, and there's like a transfer of energy. Well, you can imagine these Tesla balls as being these bridges, whether it's like the emergence of life and the human, the idea of the human. Those are like almost like inevitable points via which the universe will end up creating, regardless of what happens. Now, here you can take this path or that path. It doesn't really matter to the universe what happens in between them, but you'll have to go from one to the other. That is inevitable. Why? Because they're key structures in the universe. And don't forget that it's not humans as humans. It's more the idea of a biological creature that can make the link between the physical world and the immaterial world. And it doesn't have to be human. It can be dolphins. It can be anything. It doesn't really matter. But that this has these creatures can link up together and form a harmonious whole, which will allow for this world of ideas to become self-aware. So imagine if right here, this is right before the emergence of life, you have all the constitutive parts, like, proteins, amino acids, all that stuff. And imagine if each human was also like a molecule or something, and that we all of our ideas basically have to harmonize and click together to form a coherent whole. Almost like if all of these theories, science, religions, whatever, are like organs or zones in a superior being's brain, and they have to, almost like a puzzle assembling itself to form something coherent and whole. And that is within nobody's control, not mine, not anybody else's. But keeping an open mind and focusing on what you want to do, what you feel like doing, what you feel attracted to, as in terms of your emotions, your gut feeling, is probably the best way to not be led astray. Because, again, like I said, no amounts of arguments are going to prove or disprove anything at this point. Just like in the very beginning of science, and this is really important to understand, when you have the emergence of a new theory, there is no evidence, there are no facts, and nobody's convinced with a big, thick treaty of, the laws of gravity or whatever. What does convince people is the emotional state of the people that carry that kind of new world vision. Now, what attracts you more? a scientist that is completely depressed, panicked, he doesn't know what to do with his life, completely lost, whatever. But he can prove to you, absolutely, without a doubt, he has all the mathematical formulas, all the evidence that science is the next big thing. Or somebody that doesn't give a crap about explaining anything, but he's just passionate and he's playing in his garage with plenty of things and playing with, light bulbs and things like weird things like the very first machines. And he has this enthusiasm for the future and this vision of humanity being able to overcome its hardship via this mechanization and use of technologies. Now, that is the kind of person that is going to persuade you to shift your worldview from, for instance, monotheism and the world is over, it's going to end in an apocalypse, to, oh, right, okay, so if I transition to this other world vision, maybe I can also tune in to that kind of enthusiasm. And that is exactly what we need. So whether it's Nassim Haramein, CTMU, quantum this, quantum that, simulation theory, whatever, don't necessarily delve too deep into the arguments, the facts, because for the moment, normally, if this process holds, there are not that many. Just like in the beginnings of science, you couldn't find so much evidence or proof for the fact that that operating system or future operating system was the right one. But what you can do is you can scan for the people that are pushing for these kinds of new world visions and see if their emotional state, you can enter in resonance with that. You can feel that is something that expands your being or contracts it, whether it's something that feels harmonious to you when you put it in your body as an idea and sort of breathe into it or not. And just observe the people that are talking about it, the people that are acting on it, and see if their newfound attitudes is something that inspires you or not. And also that's one of the reasons, for instance, that I've been saying that many of the environmentalists and the people like Greta or whatever, there's this kind of resistance to their ideas because they have such a dark way of talking about humanity. It's so pessimistic, so almost as if we're doomed, and there's this like fear and desperation and whatever, which really it could remind you of some like fanatic priests in the 14th or 15th century that were like yelling at whoever was willing to hear them that if they don't repent, if they don't go and pray, then the apocalypse is upon us and we're all going to die. Nobody wants to hear that. And it's not that with science suddenly all your problems disappear. Like if you look at the Black Plague, for instance, which is as close as the manifestation of an apocalypse as you can get to, science didn't make the Black Plague disappear, but it completely shifted your attitude to the same problem. Now you viewed it as something that could be solved theoretically. And the solutions, the way that you go about solving that kind of problem, your attitude faced with that problem is completely different as well. Instead of being, on your knees praying all day, you could start washing your hands and practicing better hygiene. And that is a massive difference, a massive amount of difference. And the same holds true for any of these alternate theories. It's how do you feel in your relationship to all the challenges that were faced? Do you feel like you're now equipped with some way of being or some attitudes or some actions that feel good to you as a human, that give you hope for the future, that believe that now you're more in control or less affected or less negatively affected by all of this, especially psychically, in terms of you like alleviating your fears faced with climate change and all this stuff? Or do they not help? Do they not provide for any kind of comfort or this kind of expanding kind of experience? And that's really, really important. And so that's also why I'm sharing this with you, is because ultimately you can judge what I'm saying by exactly the same standards. And that's ultimately how I would like you to judge me and what I'm proposing in terms of my theories. Do they feel like they are expansive? They give you hope. They give you, this. When you act on them, do those actions feel good? When you view the world via the lens that I'm proposing, what's your state of being? What's your state of, and that's much more important than any other consideration. So again, what I had as a vision, if you want to know it, is that at a certain point, if humanity reaches a point where we form a global collective organism, then it's almost as if from that moment on, it's almost as if time sort of stops. And this becomes a kind of a template where now you have several copies of Earth interacting with itself. Just like, a cell, when the first living cell kind of divides into two, then it interacts with itself, or two copies of itself, and it self-actualizes. And so imagine if, the Earth then, these Earths, parallel Earths, experience plenty of different timelines, parallel timelines that were interacting with each other. And you could view this as like a bubble of harmonized ideas and concepts, just like a living cell could be viewed as a bubble of harmonized chemistry, I guess. And when interacting with itself, you call it biology. And here would be a bubble of self-organized or coherent ideas, concepts, and thoughts. And once they form a whole, then you can make them interact with each other, and that, creates a world. I don't even know how to imagine this. It's even too far for me. It's like asking a living cell to imagine a body. But then something that I also wanted to point out is that a metaphor I'm giving very often is that imagine right before the emergence of the first living cell, there were all the constitutive parts of the living cell. And here, in a future dimension of biology, you had the various clouds of pre-existing, of let's say ethereal, biological, proto-biological creatures. So just like, for instance, right now, as a human, you can imagine plenty of different versions of future Earth in all of the sci-fi movies you have, but some of them are not viable. But they still exist because as soon as you think of them, you think them into existence. And it's almost as if all of these parts, like let's say proteins, amino acids, all the constitutive parts of the living cell were receiving the visit of, let's say, a unicorn, a dragon, and a mermaid. And these kind of beings that exist as a kind of a potential of what could potentially be built out of a combination of these living cells. And they were coming here and they were lobbying and they were saying, why don't the proteins like string these be of this and that shape, and the amino acids of this and that shape, so that when this living cell first assembles, it will actually steer the experience into manifesting us, to giving us a more tangible or physical form. And we can now become much more solid and not just these abstract things that experience themselves in a timeless, spaceless dimension. Oh, we would really like to be attached to this timeline of physicality. And if the living cell had listened to them, then it would have been led astray and it would have gone into a dead-end direction, because obviously these ideas don't lead to the next bridge, which is manifesting humans, which form a global collective organism, and then you transition into the realm of thought, right? So the living cell says, no, thank you. I'll actually go about following this logic, and then humans might at some point, actually bring you into this dimension, and through genetic engineering and all kinds of weird technologies and stuff, give you a physical form here, because this is where you belong. And here you do no longer pose a kind of threat to the universe experiencing itself into infinity. And so it's this role of the universe of saying every idea comes at the right time, when the universe has reached the level of consciousness globally where it can be integrated into a coherent experience without interrupting it or disrupting it. And the same thing happens right now when you have Ashtar Command, or any kind of angelic beings, or any kind of reptilians or Arcturians, what kind of ETs contacting us. They represent, in many cases, not always, but in many cases, the same thing. It's like in this realm, in this 4 or 5D, whatever you want to call it, in this dimension of pure thought concepts or whatever, you have bubbles of harmoniously arranged ideas, concepts, and thoughts, which are more advanced, quote unquote, than humanity, because we're not yet assembled into a harmonious whole, but that would like to transition into physicality, would like to be stitched on to this, or bandwagoned into this main sort of timeline of the universe experiencing itself at this point. But maybe it's not the right time. Maybe going in this direction and saying, oh, the Arcturians are advising us to, do this, that, and welcome their ships and whatever, harmonize in this or that direction. This is a dead end right here. Maybe we're meant to go in this way, and maybe we're meant to contact them at a later point here in the timeline. And that will not lead us to a dead end. And so ultimately, it's not, this is not really our decision. We're being lobbied from all sides, from quote unquote the future, even if it's not really the future. It's like a higher dimension which would like to be stitched upon this one timeline of physicality, which is very attractive in many ways, but it's not really our decision to include it or not. It shouldn't. It's being subservient to this logic that has prevailed so far of creating an uninterrupted experience into infinity, and respecting the manifestation of the next bridge, which is something that I cannot imagine, but just saying whatever the next bridge is, that from like the human collective being part of another, yet a bigger whole, even a bigger whole, and I don't know what that is, but that has to form a coherent whole, and then consciousness becomes even larger. Well, whatever that thing is, my aim is to go for that. That's the target here. And then whatever happens in between, I don't care. I don't really know. I just accept this logic. And that's exactly what the first living cell would have said. It would have said, you know what? I don't care if you're a lion or a dinosaur or whatever. And if you would like to become more physical and not remain as an abstract idea somewhere in like the future potential, I will manifest you if and only if it leads me to the next bridge, which is a humanoid species which manages to harmonize itself, form a coherent whole, so that it can be the bridge between biology and the realm of ideas. And humans have to say, well, we accept any kind of model or experience that will allow us to be the bridge between the world of ideas, concepts, thoughts, and whatever comes after it. And I can't really formulate what that is. I really wouldn't know. But just saying that, it's your target, and you have to go through it. And then whatever happens in between, it's not in your control. And you use your emotions, your emotional intelligence to seek that. Don't forsake your logic, but use it with discernment. So I hope this was useful for you, interesting. If you have any comments, feel free to share. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hopefully, maybe I'll be exploring more of certain different models because I've been advised to look at the CTMU, for instance. So maybe I'll delve a little bit more into that. But I wanted to make it explicit the criteria via which I'm judging whether a theory is something that appeals to me, that I like to subscribe to or talk about, or not. And they're not necessarily logical or rational. And that's really something that I wanted to stress because many people might not get that at first. So talk to you next video.